What's up? DSP here, and today we're going to be talking about a game which a lot of people asked me during my playthrough to do a Hateful Truth on. It is actually, I believe, my second longest playthrough ever in the history of me doing playthroughs, which has been just over a year now. It is a very long game. Some say a tedious game, some say a great game, but what do I think? That's really what people have been asking. So today, we're going to jump into a much requested Hateful Truth for a game that is a unique action, FPS, and role-playing game fusion. If you don't know what it is yet, duh. For the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, it's Borderlands. Kill me with it, beats. Borderlands is a pretty unique game in that it's actually a fusion of two different gaming styles. There's first-person shooter, and then there's also role-playing game elements in it. Obviously, the first-person shooter part is pretty straightforward, and you can figure out why it's a first-person shooter game. But for the role-playing game elements, you gain experience for every kill that you do. You get money that is dropped by random enemies or found in treasure chests or other areas. There's loot dropped by these enemies, and when I say loot, I basically mean guns. And as the game progresses, you get better and better guns, some with different capabilities such as incendiary rounds, explosive rounds, electric rounds, each having their own unique properties. And so the game really becomes a mishmash of going out and killing everything you can find and then really trying to scavenge around for the best weapons that you can find as well. One thing that you're going to find that is a critical part of this game is grinding. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, let's do a little bit of Grinding 101. Okay, so if you're not familiar with role-playing games, you might not really be familiar with the term grinding or what it means. So let me just do a really brief explanation. Grinding basically means doing repetitive, albeit boring, actions repeatedly in order to either, say, level up in a role-playing game by gaining experience points repeatedly, to advance in the story by beating very repetitive but trivial missions, possibly to gain enough money to buy a crucial item that makes you able to continue on in the game. But the bottom line is, doing whatever it is that you have to do repeatedly is extremely boring. It's not very exciting. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some games out there such as, I'll bring it up, World of Warcraft, which seem to do grinding in a very interesting way. And a lot of the times, because you are in a party atmosphere with your friends when you're playing a game like that, it's very fun to grind. And in fact, it actually becomes addictive. It's actually a factor of the game, that the reason that you want to play is to go back and grind with your friends. It's kind of a social aspect. But for Borderlands, being that it's a console game, you have to understand that you're not always going to be with your friends when you're playing it. And so having a necessary part of the game where you have to grind repeatedly over and over wasn't exactly the best idea. And my major gripe is that in a lot of these games, the grinding happens, right at the beginning for a little bit, then the game will pick up, and then maybe later on in the game there'll be some more additional grinding, and then the story picks up. But in Borderlands, this game wants you to grind right from the get-go. Like, I'd say probably the first 15 to 20 levels of the game are just the most repetitive, grinding, boring shit ever. I mean, kill a skag here, kill 5 skags, kill the special skag, kill the father skag, kill the mother skag. You go to another area to kill some random bandit, oh look, 42 more skags you have to kill. Then it turns into maybe killing certain bandits, turning on certain things, and at one point when the enemies just keep respawning and you had to revisit that location for the 7th time, you're going to get pretty fucking bored with the game. In fact, a lot of the people, it wasn't even me saying it, a lot of the people watching my playthrough of this game were complaining that, Phil, this game's so repetitive and boring, why do you stick with it? So, to be honest, the first 15 to 20 levels of this game, in my opinion, sucked. Now, not to say that that's the same for everyone. The reason that it probably sucked for me was because none of my friends bought this game. I was the only person playing it, and because of that, I was basically soloing the campaign. A little more on that later. We will cover why I was playing by myself, but let's just leave it at that. The first 15 to 20 levels of this game are so fucking repetitive and boring that you may actually get turned off. Hopefully, though, you do stick in there, and I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. But for the most part, the beginning of this game, you see this guy? You see this guy on the cover of the game? You see what he's doing? He's blowing his own fucking brains out. That's exactly the perfect fucking analogy for what you want to fucking do when you're playing the first 15 to 20 levels of this game. You just want to and blow your fucking brains out because it's so boring. However, once you reach about level 20 and the levels above that, I'd say the game actually does pick up a bit. And the major reason behind it is the story does pick up a little bit, the little bit of story that there is, and there's starts to be a lot better loot. You start to find a lot better weapons. This is probably the level where you'll start to find some of the better incendiary weapons. One of the major additions is that you finally get fast travel added to the game, which basically means you can warp between any one of the transportation points immediately rather than having to drive a vehicle around the map. Why that wasn't available from the very beginning, I don't have a clue, and that is another big major boo-boo for this game. If you're going to have fast travel, just have it from the get-go. Don't force one of the beginner level players to have to repeatedly drive around the same areas over and over because it's boring. Vehicles respawn infinitely, which is pretty cool. You don't have to worry about ever not having a vehicle because you can always get another one. And one of the major pluses, I think, of the game is when you finally get to fight some of the badass bosses. You know, I really thought the bosses in this game were a cool addition. I thought they were unique, and I thought that they're some of the best gameplay in the game, so I wanted to talk a little bit about them. It is going to be a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't played the game, but obviously you've seen the trailers and you kind of get the gist of what these things are anyway. One of the first big bosses that you encounter is Sledge, who's just a really big asshole in charge of one of these raider gangs, and there's a lot of strategy involved in beating him. It's not just run and straight at him and shoot him, because what you find out right away is that he has a supremely strong shield. So once you finally figure out a strategy to get his shield down, now you have to figure out how to kill him. And by the way, he has one of the best shotguns in the game that can kill you almost instantly if you make the wrong move. So right off the bat, one of the first big boss battles you have is pretty epic, and it really takes a lot of strategy in order to beat him rather than just run and gun like most FPS games. What I really like, though, is the next major boss that you fight is completely different. They didn't just decide to throw the same shit at you repeatedly, the same kind of boss. This guy is set way fucking back in the background in a huge canyon on a turret, and your goal is to figure out how to get to that turret while he's shooting at you, while he's surrounded by 30 plus henchmen who are all out to kill you. So rather than the first one where it was, gee, how do I kill this one guy and maybe some of his cronies because he's a really tough asshole, this guy's really not that tough. It's just pretty much figuring out how to get to him in one piece, get that perfect shot, that right angle where he can't shoot you but you can shoot him, and finally figuring out how to take him out. The next major boss is a giant thing that is like the size of the entire map. It totally hit you from left field because so far in this game all the bosses have been just kind of human-like opponents. You didn't really expect anything like that, so that's a nice twist. And then finally, the last boss, in my opinion, wasn't very impressive. Was it big? Absolutely. Was it epic? Absolutely. But it just wasn't my cup of tea. I thought it was a little bit generic for a final battle. It was a little anticlimactic. You've seen this kind of giant boss before in other games, this tentacle monster looking fucking thing, and I really wasn't too impressed with it. In honesty, it kind of reminded me of the first boss from Brutal Legend, which is kind of strange because the first boss in one game is the same as the last boss in another, and the games pretty much came out at almost the same time. Figure that one out. But overall, I think the boss battles are pretty interesting, pretty unique, and definitely a major highlight of the game.